All right, so today we're going deep on secure coding in 2025.
Sounds exciting.
Now, this isn't just for the hardcore techies out there.
Definitely not.
This affects everyone. We live in a world where everything's running on software.
Yeah, pretty much.
From cars to our smart homes, even coffee makers.
Right, it's everywhere.
And to protect all that, secure coding is absolutely crucial.
You got it. It's not just some optional extra anymore. It's essential for, well, protecting our data, our privacy, everything, really.
Exactly. And we've got a whole stack of research here.
Oh, yeah.
It really paints a picture of what the future of secure coding looks like, what's coming down the pipeline.
I'm all ears. What's it saying?
Yeah.
What are the big changes?
Well, one of the biggest things is this move towards microservices.
Ah, microservices. Yeah, that's a big one.
But for those who might not be familiar,
Sure.
what are microservices and why are they such a game changer?
Okay, so imagine instead of having this one giant piece of software.
Like a massive monolith.
Exactly, like this huge unwieldy thing. You break it down into smaller pieces.
Smaller, more manageable chunks.
Right, these are your microservices. And they're all interconnected.
Okay, I'm picturing it like departments in a company.
Perfect analogy. Each microservice has its own specific job.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that impact security then?
Well, think about it. More moving parts means more points where things could go wrong.
More entry points for those bad guys.
Precisely. Each of those little services needs its own security, and the communication between them, that needs protection too.
Right, because if one little piece gets compromised,
Domino effect.
exactly, the whole system could be vulnerable.
That's the challenge with microservices.
So what are some of the solutions? How are developers dealing with this new world?
Well, one approach is minimizing the attack surface.
Attack surface.
Yeah, it's basically all about reducing those entry points for attackers, limiting access to each service, locking things down tight.
I get it, like locking all the doors and windows in your house.
Exactly. Make it as hard as possible for anyone trying to get in where they shouldn't be.
Makes sense. And what about this mutual TLS thing I keep hearing about?
Ah, MTLS. It's a way of verifying both sides of a communication channel.
Sender and receiver.
You got it. It's like a secret handshake.
Oh, I like that. So only the trusted services can talk to each other.
Exactly. No imposters allowed. But it gets complex, managing all that as the system grows.
I can imagine more services, more interactions. That's a lot to keep track of.
And that's where automation is becoming so crucial.
Automation, like robots doing the security checks for us.
You got it.
Yeah.
Tools like SAST and DAST, for instance.
So tell me, what are those then? SAST and DAST.
Okay, so SAST analyzes your code, looks for security flaws while you're writing it.
And DAST?
DAST comes in later, testing the application from the outside as if it's a real attack happening.
So it's like having two sets of eyes constantly on the lookout.
That's the idea. You catch vulnerabilities early on with SAST, and DAST helps you find anything that might slip through the cracks.
Sounds like a pretty comprehensive approach. But are these tools, are they foolproof? Do they catch everything?
Well, no security tool is perfect. You can get false alarms, and they might miss certain things.
I see.
But they are really valuable tools in our arsenal. Identify and fix a huge range of problems.
So it's like a safety net, but you still need to be vigilant.
Absolutely. Use your judgment. Keep your eyes open.
So we've talked securing those individual services, right?
Right.
And then the communication between them. But what about the infrastructure itself?
Ah, good point. That's where Secure Infrastructure as Code comes in, or IAC for short.
IEC. So what's that all about then?
It's basically building security into the foundations of your system, using code to define and manage your infrastructure.
Instead of manually configuring this.
Exactly. You automate the process and bake in security best practices right from the start.
I like that. So it's like having a blueprint, ensuring a certain level of security by design.
Exactly. It's especially important with cloud computing nowadays. Things change so quickly.
Yeah, everything's so dynamic.
Yeah.
So you need that security embedded from the ground up.
Precisely. It's a much more proactive approach to security, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. But even with all these measures in place, someone can still try to break in, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's no such thing as 100% security. But that's where the idea of zero trust comes in.
Zero trust. Sounds intense.
It is, in a way. It assumes no user or device can be automatically trusted.
Even if they're already inside the network.
Even then, it's about constantly verifying, minimizing risk, and making sure only authorized access is granted.
So it's like a security checkpoint at every door, even within the building.
You got it. No one gets a free pass.
Got ya.
Constant vigilance. And that's where continuous authentication comes in.
Continuous authentication. So not just logging in once?
Nope. You have to re-authenticate regularly. Prove you're still you, often using multi-factor authentication.
So it's like showing your ID multiple times a day, just to be sure.
Exactly. A bit of a hassle, maybe,
Yeah.
but the trade-off is worth it.
Yeah, when you consider the alternative,
Yeah.
a security breach could be disastrous.
Absolutely. And luckily, authentication tech is getting more user-friendly all the time. Biometrics, for instance, make things much smoother.
Right, so it's about finding that balance, security versus usability.
Exactly. And continuous authentication, well, that's just one part of the zero trust puzzle.
There's more. What else is there?
Well, there's microsegmentation, for example.
Microsegmentation, another new term for me.
It's all about dividing your network into smaller, isolated sections.
So if one part gets compromised,
The damage is contained. It can't easily spread to other areas.
it's like having different security zones within the building itself.
Exactly. But remember, zero trust is not a one-size-fits-all solution.
I see. So it needs to be adapted to each individual organization's needs.
Right. It's a framework, a way of thinking about security. You need to tailor it, keep evaluating and evolving your approach.
Because the bad guys are always evolving, right?
Exactly. It's a constant arms race.
It sounds like this zero trust idea is really shifting how we view security altogether.
It is, moving away from that traditional perimeter-based approach.
Yeah.
Just building walls around your network.
Right, it's not enough anymore.
Not at all. Zero trust is much more granular, dynamic. We're verifying and securing at every level.
And with so much sensitive data being stored and processed, what are we doing to protect that, even if someone gets past all these security measures?
Well, one fundamental principle is data encryption.
Encryption, so like scrambling the data so it's unreadable without the key.
Exactly. It's like putting your valuables in a safe. Even if someone breaks in, they can't get to the good stuff without the key.
Makes sense. But is that the only way we protect sensitive data?
Oh, no, there's more. We have things like tokenization and data masking.
Tokenization and data masking. Now, those sound interesting. How are they different from encryption?
So with tokenization, you're replacing sensitive data with, let's call them stand-ins.
Stand-ins.
Yeah. These are called tokens. They represent the real data, but don't contain the sensitive information themselves.
So even if the token is intercepted, the actual data is still safe.
Exactly. It's like giving someone a copy of your house key, but it only opens one specific door, not the whole house.
Clever. So what about data masking then? How does that work?
Data masking is kind of similar, but it's more for protecting data used in testing and development.
So not the live production data.
Right. You replace the sensitive stuff with realistic but fake data. That way developers can work without compromising security.
It's like a sanitized version. Safe to use, but doesn't risk the real data. Makes sense. But with all these different techniques and constantly evolving threats, it must be hard for developers to keep up.
It is. That's why education and training are more important than ever.
Developers need to be constantly learning, right?
Absolutely. They need the knowledge, the skills to build secure software from the ground up.
It's not just about writing code that works. It's about understanding the security implications of every line.
Precisely. And the threats are always changing, so it's a continuous learning process. Staying up to date on the latest vulnerabilities, the newest attack methods, and the best ways to counter them.
It's like a doctor who has to keep learning about new diseases and treatments throughout their entire career.
A perfect analogy.
So how do we make sure developers are getting the training they need?
Well, there's traditional training, courses, online resources, but there are also more hands-on approaches. Capture the flag competitions, bug bounty programs, things that make learning fun and engaging.
Right, because who wants to just read a textbook all day? It's got to be interesting and relevant.
Exactly. But it's not just about the individual developers, right?
Organizations have to play a role too, right?
Absolutely. They need to make secure coding a priority, provide the right resources, the support, the culture.
Create an environment where security is everyone's responsibility.
That's the key. Everyone has to be on board, from the developers writing the code to the leaders setting the strategy.
It's a collective effort.
Yeah.
So what are some practical steps that organizations can take? What should they be focusing on?
Well, establishing clear security policies is a good starting point. Having clear guidelines that developers can follow, integrating security testing into the development process. That way, it's not an afterthought, it's baked in from the beginning.
Right. It's about making security a core part of the development process, not just something you tack on at the end.
Exactly. And it's about creating a culture where security is everyone's responsibility.
It's about building a more secure digital world together.
And that's a goal worth striving for, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So it's not just about the technical aspects. It's about the human element as well.
It is. It's about people making choices, understanding the implications of those choices. It's about awareness and education.
And it's about working together to create a more secure future for everyone. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Well said. You know, building on what we were just discussing, it's becoming more and more clear that security and ethics, they're kind of intertwined.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
As we create these, more complex systems, more interconnected,
Yeah.
it's not just about like protecting them from attacks, it's also about how we use them, right?
Responsibly, ethically,
Yeah.
making sure the technology is used for good.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big trend that's shaping secure coding in 2025.
Okay, what's that?
The whole landscape of privacy regulations. Remember we touched on it earlier?
Yeah, with GDPR and CCPA.
Right, those are the big ones everyone knows. But it feels like every other week.
There's a new one.
Exactly. It's a lot to keep up with.
How do developers even keep track?
It is a challenge, for sure. But there are resources out there.
Oh, good.
Organizations like the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, they offer guidance, training on all these regulations.
So there's help available.
Definitely. And there are also tools that can help developers, actually spot privacy risks in their code.
So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about having the tools to actually implement them,
Exactly. It's about building that privacy-first mindset.
baking it into the software itself.
Precisely. From the very beginning, the design phase, all the way through.
So it's not just an afterthought.
No, not at all. It needs to be part of the DNA of the software.
I like that, the DNA of the software. But that's going to be a big shift for a lot of developers, right? I mean, they're used to focusing on functionality, performance.
You're right, it is a change. But privacy is becoming more and more important to users.
I mean, if I don't trust a company with my data, I'm not going to use their product.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how cool or convenient it is.
Trust is everything. So we've talked about what developers and organizations can do. What about us, the users? What can we do to protect ourselves?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It feels like a bit of a Wild West out there sometimes.
It can, yeah. And while we need to hold those developers and companies accountable,
Make sure they're doing the right thing.
absolutely, we also have a responsibility to protect ourselves.
Right. It's like locking your doors, even if you live in a safe neighborhood.
Exactly. You can't just rely on others to keep you safe. You got to take some responsibility.
So what are some basic steps we can take?
Well, one of the most important things is, good password hygiene.
Password hygiene.
Oh.
So that's using strong, unique passwords.
Exactly. For every single online account you have. And consider a password manager.
A password manager, yeah, those can be really helpful, especially if you have a lot of accounts.
They generate and store your passwords securely, so you don't have to remember them all.
Or write them down on a sticky note.
Definitely not.
Data breaches are becoming so common these days.
It's scary how often it happens. So strong, unique passwords are essential.
And what about two-factor authentication?
Oh, absolutely. It's that extra layer of security where you need more than just your password to log in.
Right, like a code from your phone or an email.
Exactly. It makes it so much harder for attackers to get in, even if they have your password.
It's like a second lock on your door.
Precisely. And so many websites and services offer it now, there's really no excuse not to use it.
I think a lot of people are intimidated by it, but it's actually really simple to set up.
It is. Most of the time, it's just a toggle switch in your account settings.
And while we're on the topic of security, we can't forget about phishing scams.
Oh, those are nasty.
They seem to be getting more sophisticated all the time,
They really are. It's all about tricking you into giving up your personal info.
like your passwords, bank details.
Exactly. They often pose as legitimate organizations, your bank, a social media platform, even a government agency.
It's so easy to fall for them if you're not careful.
It is. The emails and text messages look so real these days.
So what can we do to protect ourselves from these scams?
The key is to be really cautious about what you click on. If an email or text seems even slightly suspicious, don't click any links, don't open any attachments, go directly to the organization's website or app to verify.
It's better to be safe than sorry. Because once your data is out there, it's out there.
Exactly. It's not just about financial losses, it's about your privacy, too.
It's like losing control of your own identity.
It can feel like that. And social media, well, that's a whole other ballgame.
Oh yeah, people share so much personal information online.
It's important to think twice before posting anything. Your address, your phone number, your travel plans.
Or even just your daily routine. That stuff can be used by attackers too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all about being aware of the risks and making informed choices.
Not living in fear, but being empowered.
Exactly. And another simple thing people can do is keep their software up to date.
Oh yeah, those updates can be annoying sometimes.
I know, but they often contain crucial security patches. They fix vulnerabilities that attackers could exploit.
So they're actually really important.
They are. And a lot of devices and apps let you set up automatic updates now.
That's a good idea. Set it and forget it.
Exactly. It's like having a security guard constantly patrolling your system, patching up any holes before the bad guys can get in.
And speaking of security guards, what about antivirus software? Is that still necessary?
It definitely is. It's your first line of defense against malware.
Malware, that's the nasty stuff that can steal your data or damage your computer, right?
Exactly. Antivirus software helps to detect and block those threats before they can do any harm.
So it's like a bouncer at the door, checking everyone who tries to enter.
A good analogy, but with so many different antivirus programs out there, it can be tough to choose.
Yeah, how do you know which one is best?
Well, it depends on your individual needs and budget. Some programs are more comprehensive, others are more lightweight. Do some research, read reviews.
And even with the best antivirus software, it's still important to be careful online. Don't click on links from unknown sources, and be wary of attachments from people you don't know.
Absolutely. If something seems off, trust your instincts. It's better to err on the side of caution.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from passwords to phishing to antivirus.
Yeah.
It can feel a bit overwhelming, all this security stuff.
It can, yeah. But you don't have to do everything at once. Start with the basics, like strong passwords and two-factor authentication, then gradually incorporate other practices.
Small steps. Build up those good habits.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to be a tech expert to stay safe online.
There are lots of resources out there to help.
There are websites, articles, videos that explain these things in plain language, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
Right, there's no shame in that. We all need a little help sometimes.
Absolutely. We're all in this together, right?
And that brings us back to what we were talking about earlier. Cybersecurity, it's not just a technical issue.
It's a human issue. People making choices, good and bad, and hopefully learning from each other. It's about creating a culture of security.
Like a digital neighborhood watch. We're all looking out for each other, sharing information about potential threats.
Exactly. The more we can raise awareness, educate people about cybersecurity,
The better equipped we'll be to navigate this digital world.
and build a more secure future for everyone. It's not about building walls, it's about building bridges.
Fostering a sense of community.
That's a powerful message, I think.
It is. So we've talked about the challenges, the risks, but I think it's important to end on a positive note. What are some of the advancements in secure coding that give you hope for the future?
That's a great question. There are a lot of things happening that I'm really excited about. One area that's particularly promising is AI.
Artificial intelligence.
Yes.
In cybersecurity.
Exactly. AI and machine learning have the potential to revolutionize how we detect and respond to threats. We're already seeing some incredible applications: threat intelligence, malware analysis, even predicting vulnerabilities before they're exploited.
So it's like having AI-powered security guards working 24/7 to keep us safe.
That's the idea. And as these technologies evolve, they'll become even more sophisticated, even more effective.
That's really exciting to hear. And what about those secure coding principles we talked about earlier? Are those evolving too?
Well, yeah, those principles are always being refined, updated to keep up with new challenges. But the core ideas, minimizing that attack surface, automation, zero trust architecture, secure data handling, those are always going to be relevant.
So it's like building a strong foundation and constantly reinforcing it.
Exactly. Secure coding is a continuous process, always improving, always evolving. We have to stay ahead of the curve, anticipate new threats.
It's a never-ending battle, but one that we can win.
I believe so. We just have to work together, keep innovating, and never stop learning.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive into secure coding in 2025. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked about making things secure, but what about the ethical implications?
Ah, yes, that's a really important question. We have to consider the impact of the technology we're building on society, on individual privacy. It's a big responsibility.
It is. As developers, we need to ask ourselves, are we using our powers for good?
Exactly. Building technology that benefits humanity, not something that could be used to harm or exploit.
It's not just about writing code. It's about writing a better future.
Beautifully put. And on that note, I think we'll leave our listeners with that thought-provoking challenge. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has. We've explored so much about secure coding in 2025.
Yeah, from those technical details.
Like
Zero
microservices
trust, all that.
to the bigger picture of, well, changing how we think about security altogether.
And of course, we can't forget about our own responsibility, right?
Absolutely. Protecting our own data, our own privacy.
It all matters.
It does. So if we had to boil all this down,
To like one key message.
yeah, what would it be?
I think it comes down to trust, really.
Trust.
Secure coding, it's all about building systems that people can trust.
Yeah.
Systems that protect their data, their privacy, their security in a world that's, well, let's face it.
It's getting more complex every day.
Exactly. More interconnected. We need that trust more than ever.
We do. And that trust, it's not just about being technically brilliant. Right?
Oh, it's bigger than that. It's about ethics.
Responsibility.
Making sure we're using technology for good.
Yeah, that's the key.
Hmm.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away?
I hope they feel empowered.
Empowered.
Yeah, like they realize that, okay, the challenges are real, the threats are out there,
No doubt about that.
but we have the tools, we have the knowledge.
To make a difference.
Exactly. We can build a more secure future. It's not about living in fear, it's about being informed,
How active.
engaged, shaping the digital world we want to live in.
Well said.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
Thanks for joining us. It's been a fascinating conversation. And to our listeners, thanks for coming along on this journey with us. We hope you learned something new, something that'll help you navigate the ever-evolving world of secure coding. Stay curious, stay secure, and until next time, keep diving deep.